I will call to order the Lake Havasu City Council regular meeting on Tuesday, January 8th, 2019 at 6 p.m. I don't believe our invocation person is here with us today, so we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Today we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the Havasu Youth Advisory Council.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we're joined today by Tatum, Aiden, and Alyssa from the Havasu Youth Advisory Council. If you could tell us a little bit about what the Havasu Youth Advisory Council does. If you can also just hit the button to make that microphone right in the center of the microphone, there should. Thank you.
There we go. Havasu Youth Advisory Council is a program under the Mayor and City Council in which we advise the Mayor and Council on what the youth would want or need in the community. For example, in the past, we've done Project We Out Care, National Public Lands Day, Teen Break, High School Only, and we're currently working on another project.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance today.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is our roll call. If the clerk would please call the roll.
Council members Cal Sheehy,
Here.
Jenny Koch,
Here.
Gordon Grote,
Here.
David Lane,
Here.
Michelle Lynn,
Here.
Donna McCoy,
Here.
Jim Dolan.
Here.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the call to the public. This is an opportunity for any citizens wishing to address the council on issues within the jurisdiction of the city. Your comments must be limited to 5 minutes or less. If you wish to address an item on the agenda tonight, we encourage you to wait until that item is brought up on the agenda so we can have a two-way conversation. At the conclusion of the open call to the public, individual members of the council may respond with criticism made by those who have addressed the council, or may ask staff to review a matter, or may ask that the matter be put on a future agenda item. You don't have to sign up for the call to the public, but we did have one person do, which is Chris Deal, if you want to make your way to the podium. There is also an indicator light there. It'll be green at the beginning of your time, and it'll kind of transgress into red after you've hit the 5 minutes. So, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Chris Diley. Pardon me. I had a broken nose, so my voice isn't very good for speaking. But I just wanted to give a positive word about the wild burros that may be part of the city of Lake Havasu, but I just happened to see them out. I'm a visitor to Havasu, and I took a walk out in the desert a couple days ago, and I saw the wild burros out on BLM lands. I saw two of them, and it just really made my day. It totally enhanced the experience for me of hiking, outdoors, and I just wanted to come in and say, I looked it up online and read a little bit, and I noticed it's been a management issue in the past. So I'm sure there's pros and cons about, the management of wild burros. But I just want to say something positive, and just point out that what I noticed was I found a cave in a wash that had a nest. I don't know if it was a burrowing owl or maybe a hawk, but it was built with sticks and cactus branches. And most interesting was the dung of the wild burros. Whatever bird or hawk it was, they take the dung and they form their nest out of it. So the nest really had a bad smell because of the dung. But I was able to see how the burros, their dung is being put to use by other wildlife. And it was really fascinating. I thought young people might really enjoy seeing something like that. If they get out, and you wouldn't see it, you wouldn't know about it unless you get out walking and happen to experience, and otherwise I wouldn't have seen it. So I just thought that would be a good thing to point out, to the city of Lake Havasu. If the burros are an issue at any time, I just want to say positive things that they made my trip here much more memorable, and it brought back. In fact, it brought back. I've got Lyme disease now, but when I was healthy, I used to hike on the coast of England and Wales, and I did the Wicklow Way, a portion of that in Ireland, through the Wicklow Mountains. But I think it was 1994, I hiked the Hadrian's Wall, Roman Emperor Hadrian. I hiked his wall from Solway on Firth to Wall's End near Newcastle upon Tyne. And before I got there, and just, real quick here, a little bit, just got like 2 minutes, but let's see, just wanted to share. I was walking out in the middle of nowhere. It was very bleak out in the moors, the North York moors. And all of a sudden it felt like an earthquake, and the ground was shaking. I didn't know what it was. And here comes a herd of wild horses, black horses, and they come storming right up to me, come charging right up to me, and they all skidded right in front of me, forming a half circle. And the leader approached me and walked forward and approached me, and I just held up my hands. And I was like, "Hey, I don't have any food for you." I apologized to him because I figured they must have had people coming out there with backpacks full of apples or something. But I was like, wow, of the 3 different times I've been to England and Ireland, that was like one of my fondest memories of that, those horses coming up and charging right up to me. And they weren't aggressive or anything. They just, once they realized they didn't have any food, they kind of nodded, and they all kind of acknowledged it, and they turned around and took off. But it was like, what a fantastic experience it is. And just one other part is the burrowing owls here in Lake Havasu. I've had 2 encounters. I've only been here for 3 weeks. I've had 2 very fun encounters where they interact with me. Just right here in front of Albertsons last night in the parking lot, and then in front of the store on the main drag here, McCulloch, and I looked it up online again, and it was in the newspaper. 2 days after I saw this burrowing owl and it was interacting with me, I looked it up, and 2 days later they had the photo of it in the newspaper, local newspaper here, and it explained that burrowing owl has made a nest in the storm drain in front of one of the storm fronts. So I just thought, 2 great things about Lake Havasu for me that I'll have as a memory is these burrowing owls and the wild burros. So I just thought that I'd bring that to your attention and just see how great that is. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the City Council at this time during the call to the public? All right, seeing none, we will close the call to the public. The next item is our consent agenda. Do any members of the council want to remove any of the items on the consent agenda?
Mayor,
Yes.
motion.
Yes.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
We do have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 7, correspondence, communications, petitions, announcements, and the city manager report. The first item is 7.1, announce vacancies on the Lake Havasu City boards, committees, and commissions. Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. There are a number of vacancies on Lake Havasu City boards, committees, and commissions. The following is a listing of those vacancies. Airport Advisory Board, 1 regular pilot member, 1 alternate non-pilot member. Board of Adjustment, 3 regular members, 3 alternate members. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, 1 regular member. Anyone that is interested can pick up a packet at City Hall, and they are also available on the city's website.
Thank you. Item 7.2 is our city manager's report. Mr. Knutson.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to take on this screen right here to share with you and the public our January 8th city manager report. So let's see if I can pull it off from this location. Lake Havasu City Professional Firefighters Charities donated $1,000 to the LHCPD Police Explorer Post for their assistance with the annual Pumpkin Festival. The funds were used to pay for travel expenses for Police Explorer competitions throughout the state. So thank you to the Lake Havasu Firefighter Charities. Members of the Lake Havasu City Police Department and Citizens Police Academy alumni held their 5th annual Shop with a Cop event before the Christmas holiday. The event starts with breakfast at the police department, followed by an escorted ride in a police vehicle to the store, shopping, and lunch. 16 kids went on a $150 shopping spree at Kmart. Most of the kids spent their money on gifts for the family and friends. 5 years ago, the program started with only 8 kids, and thanks to the community donations, the program has doubled in size. Technical difficulties. The food and drinks were donated by Starbucks, Little Caesars, and Albertsons. And Calvary Church donated gift cards to each family for a free Christmas dinner. Our wastewater employees continue to strive for excellence in pursuing additional certifications in wastewater collection. Our level 1 and level 2 certifications are required of their positions. However, level 3 and 4 are voluntary and taken for potential career advancement. I'd like to congratulate Braxton Peer and Paul Longstreet for their grade 1 certification, Jared Klostermeyer for his grade 2 certification, Ken Mowry for his grade 3 certification, and Ron Stolberg for his grade 4 certification. Nice job, gentlemen. Displayed in the graph here is the sales tax revenue by fiscal year for the last 11 years. Fiscal year to date, since July 1, sales tax revenues for November have exceeded the prior year's collections by 12.4% and exceeded budget by 7.9%. More signs of a healthy local economy. The November retail sales tax collections have increased by $24,419, or 2.4% compared to the same period last year. And fiscal year to date collections are 7% higher than last year. You can see the breakdown between the different categories. Motor and vehicle parts is our biggest one, about 35%. The largest dollar increases were in construction, retail, and use tax. City payments to the PED and CVB to support economic development and tourism has increased 10% year to date compared to prior year. And finally, the annual Havasu Balloon Festival is at Windsor 4 beginning on Thursday, January 10th through Sunday, January 13th. And the annual Buses by the Bridge event will begin Monday, January 14th and goes through Thursday, January 17th, and that'll be at Windsor 4. Another application that came through the city is for Hangar 24 is having a parking lot party on site on Saturday, January 19th. And with the events going on, we'd like to remind citizens to use extra care and caution in and around the areas when crossing city streets from parking lots and going to the different events. So thank you, Councilmember Dolan and Vice Mayor Lane for the picture. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Knudsen? All right. Thank you. We will now move on to Section 8, our public hearings. 8.1, adopt resolution number 19-3276, amending resolution number 18-3236, transferring budget appropriations from one fund, department, or division to another for fiscal year 2018-19. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This item is a resolution to amend the budget. It is not increasing the appropriations at all. We're merely shifting monies between funds and between departments. There are 4 items included in this amendment. The Vector trucks, if purchased outright with cash in the wastewater fund, we're going to be able to save like $40,000 to $70,000 in interest. So staff is proposing that we do an appropriation change to move those funds into the wastewater fund. We had available unused appropriation in the capital projects fund. A contract specialist for the city attorney's office. The amount needed for this fiscal year to cover that is about $30,000, and we had partial savings from the election costs that we were shifting from the city clerk's budget to the city attorney's budget in order to cover that. Wheeler Park Fountain, there was an increase in electricity cost of about $4,000. It's a small budget, so it couldn't accommodate even such a small increase. So we're just transferring the unallocated miscellaneous grant funds over to the Improvement District 4 budget. And then finally, the Havasu 280 project for street and utility improvements. Those costs for that project are split between capital projects, wastewater, and the IDD. And a correction was needed on those allocations so that they were reflected properly. So we are going to transfer $739,000 from capital projects to the wastewater fund to more appropriately show the cost per fund. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Do any members of the City Council have any questions for Ms. Olson? No?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Councilmember Groh.
Ms. Olson, I'm wondering, I'm assuming that there are no conflicts with granting agencies for the transfer of unallocated grant funds?
Those grant funds that are in the budget aren't specified for any particular grant, but because when we set our budget, we are setting the absolute cap on what our budget can be. We put additional grant funds in there in case grants come up through the year that we would be able to apply for that we otherwise would not. So we have a bit of a grant cushion as far as appropriation, just so we don't lose out on any grants. And we felt that the $4,000 was, minor compared to what the need is in IDD.
Any other questions? All right, this is a public hearing. We will open the public hearing at this time. Does anyone want to address the City Council on this matter? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Vice
Motion.
Mayor.
I move to adopt resolution number 19-3276, amending resolution number 18-3236, and approving the budget amendments listed on schedules E and F for fiscal year 2018-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I believe we're ready to vote.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. The next item is 8.2, request the use of contingency funds, general fund, for contracted legal services. Ms. Gary?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm here tonight to request the use of contingency funds for contracted legal services, or I usually call it outside legal services, so I'll probably use that interchangeably as I speak today. This year, we've encountered some litigation matters that have cost more than we could have anticipated when we budgeted for the funds. Every year, we sit down and we have to forecast what we think that our potential expenditures might be for contracted legal services, and it is a complete guesstimate. We look back and see what we've spent in previous years, but you never know what claims are and what litigations are going to come up each year. So we try to budget what we think is a reasonable amount. And this year we've just happened to exceed that amount. A lot of that's due to a litigation where the city was sued by ADQ. We strongly believe the city should have never been in that litigation, and we have been withdrawn from that litigation voluntarily by ADQ. However, that wasn't until we spent a great deal of money trying to defend the city in that litigation. We are seeking attorney's fees, so we're hoping to recoup some or all of those costs, but there's no guarantee that the court will approve that. And so that's going through the process now. But in the meantime, I need to request contingency funds to be able to not only pay some of the bills that are coming in now, but to make it to the end of the year. Now that the city has been withdrawn from this litigation, I don't foresee any other substantial claims or litigations or matters or where we need specialty outside of the office coming about. And so I'm hoping that up to $50,000 will cover what we need for the remainder of this year, but I can't also guarantee that. We can be sued with some crazy claim tomorrow that isn't covered by insurance. And so that's where the unknown comes from. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Do any members of the council have any questions for Ms. Gary?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Councilmember McCoy?
I just thought it would be nice for the individuals at home to know that there are certain things that, as attorneys, that might be slightly out of your realm, and that's why we have someone else come in. And also the fact that, you know, your job, you're basically reviewing every piece of paper that has to do with the city. Well, I'm telling it, you tell it.
Yes. So about 6 to 7 years ago is when I was appointed as the city attorney. Prior to that, we had an outside contracted city attorney, plus myself as the assistant city internally. And still with 2 civil attorneys, we had a budget for outside legal services to handle litigation and specialty types of matters. And so when I took over as city attorney, part of the agreement was that I would be able to keep a substantial budget to make sure that I had the tools and resources that I needed as a solo civil attorney to handle everything that needs to be handled. Yes, there are a lot of areas in municipal law that are highly specialized. So you look at anything that happens at the airport, like an FAA complaint or Part 16 complaint that comes in, that's not something that I would see every day. That we need technical experience and expertise in those areas. And you see a lot of those areas in law are so very highly specialized that it's not something that a general practitioner like myself would be able to handle. So we bring that specialty in where I'm able to assist them to help keep that cost down. But the same thing goes for any litigation. Being on my own, I don't have the resources or the time to be able to litigate a case. And so anytime that we have litigation that's outside of what is covered by insurance, I'm going to need assistance with that. And that's something that's known by council and the public should be aware of.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Lane, did you have a comment?
No, she answered it.
Okay, excellent. Any additional questions from council? All right, this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Does anyone want to address the city council on this matter? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember
Motion?
McCoy.
I move to approve the use of contingency funds available in the general fund for contracted legal services not to exceed $50,000.
Second.
We do have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Next item is 8.3, approve the cooperative purchase from VacCon Inc. for 2 VacCon single-engine PD blower combination vacuum trucks for the new wastewater vehicles. Mr. Clark.
Good afternoon, Council and Chairman. This is Mr. Randy Mazik. He's our utility lead for wastewater and been a 14-year veteran with the Lake Havasu City, and he's going to have a short presentation, short because the city manager wanted us to keep it short, presentation. But the item before you is the proposed purchase on a cooperative agreement of 2 Vector trucks to somewhat replace the 2 that we have. We're also proposing that we end up keeping one of those as kind of a third backup truck, but the reality of it is both trucks are fairly old, unreliable, and the wastewater group went through an extensive review process. 4 manufacturers actually brought trucks out. We took a look at them. We kind of test drove them to see which one would be the most effective. Luckily, the least expensive of those 4 is what you're seeing the recommendation for you tonight. It was also the most robust. One of the items that the wastewater staff mentioned is the pump, which is one of the items that is a continual maintenance problem, is relatively easy and inexpensive to replace on this item, so that'll help with reliability. But with that, I will stop talking and let Mr. Mazik start.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time. So what we have here, these are pretty much the
Mr. Mazik, could you just hit the microphone? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so these are pretty much the Vactor trucks. Essentially, it's a big shop vac. So you can vacuum up water, debris, whatever our medium is that day. The front is pretty much a hose. It's just a high pressure hose between 1,500 to 2,500 gallons or PSI. And it's a preventative maintenance kind of thing to clean our main lines, as well as break up backups. So yeah, this is just a list pretty much of the day-to-day, what we use them for, to clean the sewer lines, the lift stations, and spill cleanups. We help out treatment a lot at the plants. Hydro excavating, just pretty much digging with this rather than mechanical means. It's a little safer or less intrusive. And repairs also. Okay, the 2 trucks, this is kind of the rundown of them. One is a 2004. It has less miles than the 2010, although it's not a real good indicator of how much it's been worn. We do drive them to a site, at which point they will stay there for a while. So the equipment could be running longer than the hours indicates. Unfortunately, like Mark said, they're old and very, very unreliable. In fact, we're kind of hamstrung with what we would like to be doing maintenance-wise because we're afraid that both trucks will break down. Unfortunately, that did happen one time last year. We had an issue with the auxiliary motor on the 04 and then an electrical issue on the 2010. And we ended up having to go, luckily enough, we found a Vactor to rent in Las Vegas, and that ended up being about $13,000 for the month, which hydro excavation is kind of taking over a lot of the excavation industry. So the people we got it from, they had 20, and the one that we got was just a complete fluke because everything else was booked like a year out. Okay, so this is kind of the stats of our sewer system. We do have 350 miles of just gravity mainline. Keep in mind, although our system is pretty new as far as infrastructure goes, about 115 miles of that is 50-year-old sewer, which is clay pipe. Some of it is in rough shape, we know for sure. It's the least reliable and the easiest for roots to get into, causing backups.
And a point of emphasis is that area of the old sewer district is the stuff closest to the lake. That's your commercial areas, your industrial areas, your original residential areas. So yes, we spent a significant amount of money expanding the system, but we did not go retrofit that. And the system's robust and in good shape, but it means that because of the materials, instead of plastic, you got clay, it has joints, you have root problems, you have more maintenance issues in older clay pipe than you would have in the newer plastic pipe.
So what we're hoping to do is get 2 trucks that we can rely on, that we know are going to start every time we have an emergency, which unfortunately it does happen. And that would allow us also to be a little more proactive instead of putting out fires, that we could actually get up on a preventative maintenance program like this. This is a recurring nightmare I have. This is pretty much like a rag ball, and it's really becoming the biggest issue as far as like maintenance repairs in wastewater over the last 10 to 15 years, just because wipes of all kind are becoming more and more popular, whether it's for cleaning or whatever, and they do tumble around. This is out of one of our pump stations at Bombay, and we lucked out even finding that. If a pump sucked that up, we'd be doing a $30,000 rebuild that we hadn't budgeted for, which has come up over the last year or so. But yeah, ideally if we had 2 trucks, we would be able to take these wet wells completely to the bottom, which we would like to do quarterly. Unfortunately, we're lucky to do it once a year now with the trucks we have.
And obviously, Vector trucks are just a part of the solution. For example, we've proposed a capital improvement project to put an inline rag screening process in place on our main line. But we have over 50 pump stations, not all of them as large as these. But so there's not just 1 or 2 of these. There's a bunch.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a semi-common occurrence. This is an extreme case for sure, and not all of them are that big. But the problem is we don't always see them. If we take a wet well at the bottom, we might see it. This one, somebody just happened to be looking in during a cleaning session and saw the top of it, pulled it out, ended up being about 50 times the size they thought it was. There's another issue of rags. This was out of a check valve. So this had probably shut like the pump function down by like half, as you can imagine. All this stuff was wrapped inside the inner workings of a check valve. This was out of our IPS station, and it's more rags. It's very rough on the pumps. If it gets sucked up like that, it sets it out of balance, it blows out the bearings, it'll bend a shaft. This one in particular, actually, the bottom half of that pump had vibrated so much from the rags, it broke the studs off and it was hanging down off the side there. There's another picture of the check valve. All kinds of unpleasantness. This is what I was telling you about the hydro excavation. This is a repair we did at the Island Treatment Plant. We try to use the older Vactor for that one. It's a little tougher as far as the kind of blower it has. So a lot of stuff, especially at the treatment plant, which I think the next repair might be also. There's so many other utilities in there, and a lot of our plans are so old. If we went in there with a backhoe, it would just be a complete nightmare, and we'd be doing probably almost as much damage as we would trying to repair it. So this is the stuff we've assisted other divisions with. We've helped out with water meter repairs, a lot of the hydro excavation stuff. If they're around, we did the fiber optic repairs with them. A lot of the wayfinding sign project, we hydro excavated those for them. There's another fun repair at the island. This is we help the water division with some repairs also. They come across the same issues we do. A lot of the force mains that we've done, they'll have a common trench for other utilities, especially fiber optic, which everybody is scared to death to dig around. There's a great example.
And recently
right there.
you approved the purchase of a Vactor with a valve turning unit. So this is only an occasional use in the water area. They do have their own smaller, less expensive units than this. And so one of the choices we will make is the #1 unit we will not use for this effort, because you don't want to have it beat up with those kinds of materials. And that's why we'll end up probably keeping retrofitting one of the older ones just for that activity.
Okay, yeah, here's a prime example of the best time to use hydro excavation, because you can imagine going in there with a backhoe around all that stuff. And we have been doing a fair amount of force main repairs lately, which stuff like that, it's not uncommon for us to get in and spend 3 hours with the Vactor truck draining the pipe to be able to do the repair, which will take like a half hour. So we did that one you came out to was an 8-inch line, and it ended up, of course, it's always around dinner time. So we were out there, couldn't get our 2004 to start. Mark had to get a guy out of dinner to come down, finish a repair on the new truck, to get up there to be able to do the repair. And even though we can shut the lift stations down, unfortunately we don't have a valve to turn to keep everybody from doing laundry and washing dishes and stuff. So in the meantime, those wet wells are filling up. A lot of times we have to hire private contractors to manage that flow, and that's another headache.
And that's an important piece of the puzzle too. We don't just do the work with our own stuff here. We do contract out the pumping services, but one of the concerns is that occasionally they're not available, or they're not available as quickly as we would need them to be in an emergency.
Yeah, I believe the last time we hired him, it was 6 hours before we could get anybody to show up, and then he had an engagement dinner and had to leave. Luckily, one of our guys was able to use the truck, but this is down by one of the parks. Is another thing, having to hydro excavate around this stuff in close quarters. Yeah, very valuable. This is that break on
Mulberry, yeah.
Mulberry, go ahead. This is that break that I was just mentioning that Mark had to come down, and that's the truck. We have to, before we can do any repairs, we already got to clear out the pipe of the flow, and then have to usually go around the pipe. There's usually some sort of utility that's running a common trench. That was another fun one. Another spider web of utilities. So another thing that we use them for is when we do have a spill, we do have a certain procedure that we have to go through for ADEQ. So we got to vector up anything standing. We got to wash it down. If it's deep, we have to, scrape it up and stuff. But we pretty much use the vector for pretty much every single step of that. This is our fashion shoot with our equipment. But as you can see, this is dangerously close to going into the water, which causes a nightmare for us. Luckily, this one didn't quite make it that far, but this was on the side of the highway. Another a spill cleanup procedure there. This was at the island treatment plant. So our headworks overflowed, I believe. So, we have to handle the stuff there at all three plants. And here's part of the cleanup procedure here. We use a diluted bleach solution, and then do about 3 hours worth of reports for ADEQ. So I think it would be great also because we'll be able to get ahead of this problem and be preventative and proactive rather than reactive. And I think that's about all I have. Do you have anything to add, Mark?
I think your next questions. Yep, there you go. You have to answer any questions council might have, and we also have Mr. Mike Sledabo here, who was involved in the purchase selection process also. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Excellent. Are there any questions from council? All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to address the council at this time?
Jeff Vaughn, Lake Havasu. Where's the button?
It's on.
It's on?
Yes.
Okay. Chuck Vaughn, Lake Havasu City. I'm glad to be back.
Welcome back.
With this newer trucks like this, are these more technological, better, how can I say it, more suction than the older trucks that we have, the 4 and the 10? Are they a much better type of vehicle than what used to come out and do years ago?
Is that the question?
To Mark.
All right.
Yeah, these actually are a lot more reliable. There's been a lot more of these trucks used in the Arizona area. We have a pretty specialized weather system, I guess you could say. Also, we got very good reports back from their customer service and helping us out The problems that we had, a lot of them is the manufacturer of the trucks that we've had now are very, very, very proud of their parts, and they're all proprietary. So we can't go down to Napa and buy pretty much anything at all. So if there's a jet rotor pump that goes out, you can't rebuild them, you can't do anything. It's $20,000, period. This one has a different kind of pump, so we could repair it, rebuild it completely. They estimated between $1,200 and $1,400, and you could do it in a hotel parking lot because that was part of their sales pitch. And they're definitely more proven in, like I said, in our climate.
The other thing is a lot of our sewer is not high volume, you know, where it's not going down a 15% grade where it's going to flush everything out. We have a lot of level grade and upgrade actually because with the lift stations and that. Have you ever thought about putting out stuff in the water sewer bills about stuff not to put down their sinks, like grease and stuff like that, that would collect and make the stuff even, you know, worse for us?
Yeah, that's definitely something that's been discussed.
We
And
actually
that-
did a press.
yeah.
We did a press release just about 4 or 5 months ago with that, and we'll just do that annually or biannually to remind people.
Right. Press releases, a lot of people don't even get the paper, so I would almost suggest putting it like a little insert in the water sewer bill. The other thing is they used to use the vac truck when it wasn't in use to go around and clean out the water meter boxes. Have they stopped that completely?
That's the water division has actually purchased small, cheaper units to do that work, and so these units aren't used for that.
Okay. All right. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address council on this matter? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Vice Mayor Lane.
Just, I do have a comment. I read something the other day when this came out in the paper about these trucks, and I just wanted to clarify for the public sitting here in the audience and at home. These are not water trucks. There was a comment about, well, we could just go down and buy water trucks for $30,000 a year and be done with it. These are not water trucks. These are specialty pieces of equipment. And we have spent millions of dollars on our sewer system, and we need the tools in order to maintain that system so we don't have the breaks like we've had. You all saw the picture of the monster rag there, and we've brought it up several times here in our council meetings that we don't need those in the system. So quit using disposable wipes. They're not really disposable because that's causing a lot of our problems. And we had the big break there on Mulberry. The cost of that break alone could have paid for a good portion of this truck. And if we could do the maintenance we need to do, we're not going to have those issues. So my thoughts are we don't want to, step over $1 to save a dime. We need to supply our people with the tools that they need to do their job and do it correctly. So with that, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
I
Councilmember
have a
Lynn.
quick question. Do we have somebody on our staff that's qualified to do the maintenance and to fix any repairs on these trucks, or do we have to contract that out?
For the mass majority of the effort, it's done internally, but what I mentioned before is what we ran into was the specialty electronics and the computer systems on especially the 2010. Actually, the 2010 Vector trucks were less reliable because of that electronic component that it never quite worked after the first time it failed, and so that was a difficulty. That's one of the reasons we're really excited about this VATCon, which actually, at the time that we purchased the 2010 vehicle, wasn't really even a known company, but they've now had 8 or 10 years of experience, and what we're really pleased with is a much more robust and basic model, if you will, much less electronics, much more plug and play of mechanical stuff, and that's really what we're looking for because if we weren't having a problem with the electronics on the 2010, what we would be talking about is maybe just replacing the tank and upgrading some of those things. But we're basically been for the last 3 or 4 years chasing. I think there's been 3 or 4 electronic modules put on that thing, and it just hasn't been reliable. But that's what these units are. Again, 10 or 15 more years of a better, robust technology on them.
And part of the purchase also included would be the manufacturer sending a service person out to train our vehicle maintenance also. So that was discussed in part of the purchase.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from council? With that, Vice Mayor, I believe you had a motion.
I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I move to approve the cooperative purchase from VACCon Incorporated for two VACCon single-engine PD blower combination vacuum trucks for new wastewater vehicles in the amount of $876,820.30.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be happy to second that motion with a tiny comment, which is sometimes when you listen to what the public has to say, you get really good ideas. I have seen this work before in other areas of municipal government. A very dedicated campaign that we can leverage with things like utility bills and so forth, even online and so forth. I'm pretty sure council would see that that would be valuable to prevent us from having to have too many problems. And of course, then great equipment for our people who deserve it, our hardworking employees. And to put this in perspective, I think we have more lift stations in Las Vegas. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, a city of our size, we need at least two of these, and money well spent.
Thank you. We do have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, we're ready to vote.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you much.
Thank you. Next item is 8.4, Code Enforcement Division Update and an Overview. Mr. Morris?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and council members, thank you. With the recent changes in the composition of the city council, staff was asked to come forward and give a little update and overview of the code enforcement process. So with that, I'm going to go through a few slides here. I have a half a dozen or so. Just go over our enforcement process, some of the common violations, our enforcement philosophy, if you will, and then, of course, have time for questions and answers. So with that, our code enforcement process, as you're probably aware, it's complaint driven. That means we respond to reports that we receive from the public. The types of reports that code enforcement deals with are the nuisance code, the building code, and the zoning code. Those are things like, you know, junkyards and vehicles in broken down vehicles in the yards. Building codes could be someone's building something without a permit or in the wrong location. Zoning codes, home occupation, lighting, those sorts of things. Things we don't handle from code enforcement but are handled by other departments or organizations would be things that the police department would handle, be like animal control, barking dogs and noise. Those sorts of things are handled by the police department. Vehicles parked on or near the street are also parked illegal. That is also handled by the police department. We'll try to field some of those and kind of run interference for the police because we'd rather some of the code enforcement staff could take care of some of those things without using the police department. But in some cases, we don't, because we don't really have the authority, so we'll rely on the police department for that. The other thing that we don't really deal with is the health department. Things like green pools, pigeons, and dog feces in yards. Those are handled through the county health department. Even though we're in the city, we don't have a city health department. It's covered by the county. So when we do receive reports, how do those come in? There's a number of ways that we take in reports. First is phone. We get a number of phone in reports where we talk to the person and or have a voicemail, and we'll enter it that way. In person, when people come to the front counter, they'll fill out request forms also about reports. Email, we accept email reports. And of course, there's an app called Havasu Now, and we get a number of requests for the Havasu Now app. What we do as far as the process, then once we receive a report, we go, of course, check the property and see if it's a valid report. What we like to do is try to make contact. Person-to-person contact is really the most effective way to get results. So when we arrive at the site, we'll look and see, is this a valid report? Try to contact someone if it is and say, hey, we got this report about this, and yeah, it's a violation of the code, so we'll give you a week just to take care of it. I mean, we find that if you give someone a deadline, they're more apt to get it done by that deadline. So our first option is give them a week just to take care of it, and hopefully they do. We explain the nature of the report and then try to give them, educate them on how or what they can do to bring it into compliance and what the regulations are. so that they're aware. Some people aren't aware that it's a code violation. So the next thing we do is we'll go back in a week and check and see. If it was a violation, we'll go back, recheck it in a week. If it's taken care of, that's fine. We'll send them a thank you letter and we'll close out the case. If it's not, then we'll start the formal violation process. And that 1 week recheck, that takes up about half of our cases. We close the half of them within that first week or so typically, whether they're invalid or whether someone takes care of them. But the first week is key. That first 1 week deadline, a lot can get done in that first week. Again, if we go back and it's still a violation, we'll send a violation notice. And by city code, we give them basically 30 days to take care of it. So you see, we take care of half of these things within a week typically, as opposed to giving them 30 days. And you know how it is with deadlines, you kind of manage to that deadline. So we'll give them 30 days if it's a violation after that first week. And then we'll do a 2-week recheck. They have 30 days, but we recheck in 2 weeks to see if it's been done. If it's been done in that 2 weeks, we'll close it out and send them a thank you letter. And if it's not done, we'll send them a reminder notice saying, hey, you've got still 2 more weeks to take care of this. We haven't forgotten about it. We're still working on this. We want you to be aware that we're watching it and we're checking on it. So we're not just going to send you a letter and forget about it. We're still going after it in a way that gives them time and gives them a reminder. And then we'll do basically our 30-day recheck. And at that point, typically about 85% of the cases are done. They've been closed out. What happens is if it's still a violation, if they've been making good progress, we have some latitude to work with them. So we can give them extended time as needed. In some cases, some of these things take a long time to get into the shape they are, and it takes a while to get it into compliance. So that's where we use our experience in working with people and figuring out how to get things done and maybe able to give them additional time to get it taken care of. And then if it's not done and they're still giving us a bad time and they're not doing what they should be doing, then it could escalate to civil or criminal or abatement. So civil and criminal action, we'd rather not do that. We feel that's a last resort. It's almost like we've not done our job because we don't necessarily want to go civil and criminal because it's a lot of time and expense to do that. And if we can get it taken care of without going through that, we'd much prefer to do it that way. So that's the process overall. And you'll see typically we get pretty quick results in that first week, and then the 30 days after that, about 85%. And then they kind of trickle in with the worst ones where they make progress and we work with them. As far as the types of violations, these are the ones that we send the violation letters on. So the most common you'll see here is trash and debris, basically junk in the yards. Vehicles that aren't running is the next one. Things like buildings and setbacks that are, buildings that are in a setback. Someone's put up a storage shed in a setback, done something maybe without a permit. Weeds, and then other. And some examples of other things would be like home occupation or lighting or living in an RV, things like that. Here's some examples of before and after. And these 2 examples are of 1 week compliance. This is an example where you make contact, say, hey, all this stuff beside your house, that's a violation. You might not see it very often, but it's there. It needs to be taken care of. And a week later, it's gone. Here's another example with some stuff in front of a garage, and a week later, it's gone. So these are examples of quick compliance with that 1 week deadline. Here's some more examples that have gone a little longer. This one is an old building, greenhouse that was basically falling apart. This is an older lady who had some issues with getting help, and it was one of those examples where it took a few months just to go through that process, but they got it taken care of and into compliance. Another example, you see a number of vehicles here. One of these with, who knows why this person had all these vehicles, but this took a while because of the nature of so many vehicles there. It took a couple, 3 months to get that taken care of. But it did not involve going to court or going to civil or criminal, and the city didn't have to pay to have stuff removed and then get reimbursed for it. So these are examples of getting things done in a flexible manner. As far as the number of cases we receive, this is the average over the last 4 years or so. You'll see it's kind of cyclical. In the fall, it goes up a little bit, and then in the winter, it goes down. And typically in the spring, it peaks and goes down again. And this average is around 50 to 60 cases per month on the average. So that's 15 or so a week. Our enforcement philosophy, as I've kind of alluded to, we want to focus on the nuisance or the activity, not the person. We're not saying you're a bad person. We're saying your property needs to be taken care of. And it needs to be brought into code. So we're not going after that person. We're going after the property and trying to bring it into compliance. We try to have them come into compliance voluntarily. We don't want to take them to court necessarily because of the cost and the time. It really takes a lot longer to take them to court. If we can get compliance in a month or 2 or even 3, in a lot of cases, it's quicker than trying to take them to court because of all the processes that are involved with the court. We try to provide opportunities for solving problems, again, not punishing people. We don't go out there with a big hammer and say, you've been bad, we're going to smack you. We're saying, hey, we're going to tell you what the codes are and then give you time to take care of it in a timely manner. We don't want you to drag your feet, but we want you to take care of it. And education and communication are really the keys. Talking to people in person is great, on the phone is okay, but in person, talking to them, explaining the nature of the reports and what they need to take care of is very helpful. That's one of the keys to success. So with that, here's our code enforcement contacts. Denise Raymond is our code enforcement specialist. She's been with us for a couple of years now. She has a lot of good experience dealing with people with previous employment, animal control, and other things through police departments. And myself, I'm a planner, and I'm, of course, code enforcement lead. One other thing, we do have some pamphlets out in the lobby on the table, if anyone would like to pick up pamphlets for this, our code enforcement and our citizen's guide to what we do as code enforcement. So with that, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you for the report and the update. Do any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Morse?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Groh?
One quick question, just because I wasn't aware that junk vehicles was such a large percentage of the calls that you take. Can you just kind of share with us, and so that the people listening at home as well could hear, how do you define that? How do you define a junk vehicle? What does that look like? Just kind of bring me up to date on that, please.
Well, in the code, there are some specific things. Up on jacks, if it's on jack stands, it's not operational. When I say junk vehicle, of course, that's a euphemism. It's inoperable vehicles, vehicles that don't run, don't have current registration, that require registration, that flat tires, obviously not running. Sometimes people will stack them in a side yard, and they'll be their project car that they really never get around to. And so vehicles that obviously aren't running, if they're registered and roadworthy, then they're not considered non-operational.
Okay, so is there a limit to the number of vehicles that can be parked, say, in somebody's front yard? They may have 6 or 8. Do we have anything about that?
Thank you for that question. Our city code does not put a limit on the number of vehicles that are allowed to be on your property if they're registered and roadworthy. There are a lot of people that have a lot of different types of vehicles and boats, RVs, cars. People have a number of maybe kids that live with them and a number of vehicles for them. We don't have a maximum number. As long as they're legally parked and operational, they can be parked on their property.
Thanks. I was just curious.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from council?
I have a comment, if I may.
Yes.
First off, excuse me, I want to say thank you. One of the biggest calls I get constantly is code enforcement issues. You know that. A lot of code enforcement issues come to you through me. And when you say we go out and we do this and we do that, this is your whole team. Denise Raymond and Luke Morris. That's it. You're the only ones for all of these complaints, whether it's 60, 50, 80 for the month. The two of you are handling all of them, and that's a lot of work. But you guys are the ones that are out there day in, day out. I send a lot of things to you, but is there anything that we can do to help you to make it easier or being able to serve the public, because we do get so many complaints about this.
Well, thank you for that question. I think from the public's perspective, I think not knowing what is and is not a violation of the code. Councilmember Grote brought up vehicles parked in yards. A lot of people think that that doesn't look good, so they kind of assume it's a violation of city code, is my impression I get from the public. But again, even if the vehicle looks like it's kind of junky, but if it runs and registered, maybe someone likes to take it out in the desert and it's a kind of a beat up looking thing, and they drive it, it's legal to drive on the streets and it's registered and roadworthy, they can park something that looks kind of weird on their property, and they can take it out and it's not a violation. So I think the most common report that's not valid is non-operational vehicles or vehicles parked in yards that look like a bunch of vehicles parked on a property. So as far as that education, I guess just making people aware what the regulations are.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, this is a public hearing. We will open the public hearing at this time. Does anyone want to address City Council on this matter?
Chuck Vaughn, Lake Havasu City again. The one thing that I didn't remember hearing Luke say was that our code enforcement is complaint driven. They don't go driving around looking for violations and that which the city council and the city has deemed the way they want to have it. The other thing that I don't remember hearing Luke say was the other thing I think is people trying to do businesses out of their home. We had a person near our house that was running a repair business for Polaris, for off-road vehicles and that. No business license or anything else, and he finally got moved out. So that's the other thing is people trying, and I know it's hard to prove, but people trying to do businesses in their home illegally and that bothering neighbors and stuff like that. So that's the only thing I wanted to bring up.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address council on this matter? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Are there any additional comments from council? This item was just an update, so there is no action required of council, but thank you, Mr. Morris, for the work that you and your department do. I know it's a lot to keep our community looking good, and most of the feedback we receive is that it's looking good, so good work.
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor and Council. A lot of this hard work and results are due to our staff. Denise Raymond does an outstanding job, in my opinion, so a lot of kudos go out to her, I must confess. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your time tonight. We will now move on to item 9, which is current events. Do any council members have any council committee reports? I will give just a quick update from the Metropolitan Planning Organization. They did launch in the month of December their safe driving campaign. So over the next year, you should be hearing some information about safe driving and safe driving campaigns. And they also are working on their transit study. So the transit study will be a 1-year study that will look at what transit might look like and what transit might look like reimagined for our community. Like I said, it will be a 1-year process. There will be several open houses and public meetings. We encourage all citizens to participate, whether you're currently a transit user, expect to be a transit user, one day will be a transit user, or you'll never use it. We want everyone's opinion on what it looks like, what makes sense for our community, what your thoughts are, and what your opinions. So stay tuned for additional information from the Metropolitan Planning Organization on the transit study. Are there any other council committee reports? All right, seeing none, we will move to item 10, which is our final call to the public. Would anyone like to address the City Council at the call to the public? Seeing none, we will close the call to the public. Number 11 is future meetings. Our next meeting is Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019 at 6 p.m. It's a regular council meeting. That same week on Thursday, January 24th, 2019 at 8:30 in the morning will be the City Council Planning Retreat, and that will be located at the Islander Resort. That is open to the public, and we would encourage public participation throughout that day. You can look at the agenda online and see what areas you want to participate in. Then on Tuesday, February 12th, 2019 at 6 p.m., we have a regular meeting. And Tuesday, February 26th, 2019 at 6 p.m., we have a regular meeting. Is there any future agenda items from any of the council members? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. This meeting is adjourned.